Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast, March 1st edition. Last night, the Boilermakers scratched and clawed their way to a 76-66 win over UCLA in a must-win for the Boilermakers in Mackey Arena. And on the heels of that, Braden Smith set the all-time Purdue assist record, surpassing, Bruce Parkinson, of course, who played for Purdue from 1972 to 77. And we will have the full-length interview with Bruce, really insightful interview about his relationship with Braden Smith, but also his playing days, which are quite significant during his time as a Boilermaker point guard. The Hall of Famer Bruce Parkinson will join us shortly. We want to thank the Boiler House Prime and 811 Union Club Hotel, all those folks. Remember, this spring, Boiler House Prime opens in West Lafayette, nestled in the Burke Boilermaker Golf Complex. Experience the dining room's refined, club-inspired ambiance with a 2-story wine wall and a grand 30-seat bar. And after last night's game, I think we could all use that. Then savor an exclusive raw bar and signature cuts of beef. Visit Boiler House Prime today. Without further ado, here's Bruce Parkinson, and enjoy. And we appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen at GoldandBlack.com. We're going to go a little long, go a couple segments with Bruce today. Bruce is joining us from Florida. And I got to get you got to get started with, you go to so many games at Purdue, and I see you all the time up there, and your compadres, your fellow teammates and fellow Purdue friends are there often. The irony is that tonight against UCLA, unless we bring a helicopter down for you, you're not going to be there because you got some family obligations and a trip. But tell us about that, but then also who will be representing you, which I think is really cool, that will be there in the stands, because Braden Smith just needs 2 to tie and 3 to break against UCLA.
It's really unusual, Alan, not to be there. Pretty much the last several years, we've gone to Florida in February for about 10 days, and we have to wait till Austin's Butler schedule comes out to see when they're on the road. So that's usually about September that you have to book the vacation. And so this was a 10-day period that he finished against UConn at home on Saturday. We left to come down here on Sunday, not with any thought at all as to whether this time period could be a period where Braden would break the career assist record. So of all times to be gone, I'm in those seats all the time. We sit right behind Coach Odom and his family. My mom and some of her friends will be there, and Austin and his oldest child, Ren, are going to be there. So they will be representing the family, unfortunately. And I've already talked to Dustin and Jenny, Braden's mom and dad. They know that they know where we are. So wish I could be there.
Well, to give some context too, Bruce Parkinson, obviously a Hall of Fame member, holds that assist record, played at Purdue. First year freshmen were eligible again. Of course, he started 4 years. Actually 5 years. We'll maybe talk about that process too, because he had an injury and was out a year, and finished in 1977 under Coach Fred Schaus, recruited by George King, I believe is correct, and Bob King, of course. And then, of course, Austin Parkinson, Bruce Parkinson's son, Purdue fans know, played for Coach Gene Cady in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? And, of course, now the head coach at women's basketball at Butler. So we'll get you all up to speed. So you have to, because the story made the broadcast last week, right before Purdue's meltdown in the second half, but told a story about your relationship with the Smith family, and it really goes back a long way to Braden's dad and your son. Give us the full rundown on how this has all evolved over the years, because it's a cool story.
Well, Dustin grew up in Kokomo, went to school with Northwest. He was a year ahead of Austin and Trent, but he was a year ahead of Austin. And from the time they were probably 6 years old, Dustin's dad, Dick Smith, and I and another gentleman coached their Carver ball team. It's not AAU at the time, but really up through 8th grade, we coached kind of the AAU version at the time. Then They played with each other in high school. Again, Dustin was a year ahead of Austin, and they were very successful. Dustin, really, they had 2 point guards. And one thing, if you met Dustin today, he's probably an inch taller than me.
Yeah.
But he was small all growing up. I mean, small and didn't weigh very much. He was probably, maybe when he graduated from high school, I'm guessing like 5'10"-ish, and didn't weigh very much. Just like Braden was coming through Westfield. And so they were both kind of undervalued because of their size. And now, Dustin is probably 6'3".
Yeah.
And so that was part of the story. And so when we moved to Noblesville in 2017, we're closer to Westfield High School than we are to Noblesville High School. And of course, Jenny and Dustin and the family are in Westfield.
Yeah.
And so I think when I first saw Braden, it might have been a few AAU type games that his dad was coaching, and he was really little. I mean, at 8th grade, he was really little. And then I probably saw 30 games in high school, and it was incredible, Alan, watching. And it's as well true at Purdue, is how much that young man improved from year to year to year, up through even now this year compared to last year. So I probably saw 30 games in high school. And of course, as Matt tells, that the problem with recruiting was some of that period was the COVID period.
Yeah.
And what kind of caused me to finally call and said, you guys need to make an offer to this guy. He had just been down for an unpaid visit to an IU game. And they basically they hadn't offered either at that time. But Archie had rolled out virtually the carpet for him, spent an hour after the game talking with him. And I mean, I don't think at that point, I think they favored Purdue a bit, Braden and the family, but he was just looking for somebody to believe in him. And I finally called and just said, I told about the history of just Braden's or Dustin's growth to where he is now. I said, I think he's going to grow after high school. And I said, this guy, he's the real deal. And I said, first thing you need to know about him, he might be smarter about basketball than any of your assistant coaches. And Matt laughed, and and it was just a statement to be made as intellectually, in addition to how committed and how hard he has worked every year. And you guys are seeing that now at Purdue. Anybody that's around the program will know how committed and how hard he has worked. But he was his basketball knowledge and his ability to make others better. His 3 games in his senior year in high school, he had carried his team. I think it was the number 1, number 4, number 9, something like that. It's that Hamilton County section, basically. He played the 3 best games I have ever seen by any high school player in my history, all on a broken foot. Yeah. It was unbelievable. And so we go way back. We've been talking to Dustin and Jenny and the respect that I have for their basketball knowledge. And I was saying something to somebody the other day that I can't imagine what that dinner table is like when now Maddox, the 7th grader, is coming up. I saw him play a couple times this year. He's the real deal too.
Yeah, I saw him. I think he was seated next to Dustin at during the IU game, and I think it would give Purdue or anybody in recruiting something to look forward to. Because my guess is he won't be overlooked when the time comes if he's good enough. That part of it is interesting. All right, when you have watched him improve and physically, and there's been a lot documented about how he not only worked out in his garage and got weights going even in his days at Westfield. But I'm interested in what nobody evaluates point guards better than you do, but how, he has gotten better this year and what you see this year that's a little different what level, what next step level has he made this year? Obviously his numbers are great everywhere you turn. He's become a little bit more offensive, but what else? What other nuanced things do you see that he's really improved in?
Yeah, that's been an interesting discussion between. I had a discussion with Braden and more really with his dad, and when of course, I think one of the things in context, Alan, that everybody needs to think about. Braden has played 102 games, I think, in his career. Until this year, he never lost a non-conference game.
Yeah.
Would that be right?
Yeah, right. That's correct.
So I have to believe that those 102 games, we have always had an extremely difficult preseason schedule. Yeah. Unlike our friends down south.
Yeah.
On their preseason schedule. So he's done what he's done against what I believe, I think it's provable, the best 103 game schedule any college basketball team has played so far. And so he's been obviously blessed with Zach and other good players who are committed like Trey and Fletcher. But to be able to play with Zach for 2 years, that's incredible. But the one thing that this year, different with Zach being gone, people are seeing what we would have seen in high school if you would have followed him. He's a pass first point guard, but that kid can score. Yeah. I mean, he can flat out score. And the other thing he could do that I didn't see him doing his first 2 years. In fact, I mentioned this to Matt after Frank's celebration when we had a chance to talk. This year, you're seeing two things from Braden. Not that they haven't been there, but he's looking to score more, and they need for him to score more.
Yeah, no doubt.
And he could always do that. I mean, he could have scored more in high school than he did, but he was always trying to involve his teammates just because he is a pass-thinking first point guard. But the other thing he did in high school that he didn't do much the first 2 years, and that's why I said I talked to him once about it and his dad, and that is he can steal. He is a good defensive player. Now, we all make mistakes. We all take a few chances here and there, and you go away from one guy but I had said to him, I think it was into his first year, maybe beginning of his second, that I said, Braden, why aren't you jumping passing lanes like you used to? And why aren't you? He used to be really good when the ball went down low to the center. He is so smart. He has had a knack of going down and stealing. As soon as the big guy, he would come up from one side or the other and steal it. And he said, and Matt confirmed that when I talked to him at Frank's celebration, that Matt thought that he was too risky in some of the defensive decisions he was making. And so he shut that down. This year, it's almost like you can see even a different degree of trust in their conversations and how much they rely on him to run things on the offensive and defensive ends. But you're seeing now, I think he's averaging over a couple steals a game. He's had a couple of steals with 6 games. And so you're seeing that you didn't see the last 2 years. And of course, now they need him to score more. And so every year there's been something that's been added to the equation. Now we're seeing the full scope of his skills and abilities, I think.
When you look at that, and we talked offline, you are, to be clear, Bruce Parkinson is the last person to toot his own horn, but he was and Purdue's had, you can debate what are point guards. Billy Keller was a great player and certainly kind of did perform that role with Rick Mount and Herman Gilliam, maybe in a slightly different way than Bruce Parkinson did. But Bruce Parkinson's numbers are, and Bruce told me this, and I had done remarkably the same as Braden's. I think he said you were within a point average, your career point scoring average. He's at 12 something, you were at 11 something. Your assists per game average, very, very close. That steals thing, but people forget now. Joe Barry Carroll has the only triple double in Purdue history. 1976, I think it was, at Arizona. He had double-digit blocks, but you came very, very close several times to triple doubles. But that's the interesting thing, that you guys are so similar in numbers, and in a time where, and again, they didn't keep steals, right, for your first 3 years. You had said that before. So talk about that. That's just a unique situation. And have you ever had that conversation with Braden on that?
Not so much about. I mean, the way Braden has played has been the complete point guard.
Yeah.
And so we've always kind of talked about that. But his commitment to rebounding.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 6 foot. He's our second leading rebounder.
Yeah.
And he's averaging 4.7 or almost 5 rebounds a game. And this year, and they need him to be better because Zach's not back there now.
Yeah.
And so they need him to be better defensively, and he's showing that. So, the other thing, in addition to that strength of schedule, Alan, that Braden has been having to play, is that to do what he's doing, he's going to end up with probably 1,800 to 2,000 points, probably 900 assists, probably 600 rebounds.
Yeah.
But you have to play a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
And he and I both, I think he's at 33 and I was like at 34 or something like that. And to do what he's doing, and the stuff that I did, you've got to play. I mean, I had never been, not that I've been worried about these assists being broken, because when Braden came, I thought this is the guy, and this is the guy I want to do that, because he sees the game like I do in terms of the full breadth of responsibilities. But he's got to play, 33 minutes, probably playing too many minutes.
And that average is going to go up because he's this year. I mean, he's hardly coming out. So
exactly. And add the strength of schedule, and then that he's had to play, and the number of games. And then now, Alan, I think the other thing, he's done so well that I think our Boiler fans expect him to be perfect.
Yeah. That's a hard thing.
It's
you went through that too, I think, as a player too. I mean, your numbers were so big in your first couple of years. That's a challenge, in terms of that.
It's a challenge, and February is a hard month. That's one of the things Coach Katie was always good at, and that's been good at over the years is winning games in February, because it's a long haul. But he's had, for somebody to come in and do what he's doing, he started every game, and he's played almost most of the game. So for somebody to think about breaking like the assist records or anything else, that he's going to set these things, this collection from a point guard standpoint, that nobody, I don't think, is ever going to touch. But he's now having to do that when he's the number one person on the scouting report. And Austin was talking, he has a young lady on his team, Kylan McGuff. She's a transfer from Belmont, a senior. And she's Coach McGuff's Ohio State women's basketball coach's daughter. Mm-hmm. She is our best player by a long shot. But in college, she has never been the number one player on the scouting report. Braden is the number one player on any scouting report now. And he's probably had more attention given to him in terms of double teams than, can you think of any player in the country that has had more double teams, that now they know that if they stop him, they have a good chance of beating us. And now in these last 4 games, we've played against 4 really good teams. And it's been, but I mean, games, minutes, then execution. And it's just been incredible what Braden has done.
And that person, his personality, the family's personality. I don't think he's never lost. That's another thing. And losing and being on a 4-game streak, I can't imagine he's ever had that experience in any level of playing, because he just flat doesn't like to lose. Talk about that, and maybe not just, and you can't speak for him, but just that psyche of, you got to get out of the rut. And of course, UCLA is not going to be a cakewalk. Neither will Rutgers or Illinois in the regular season. There's no cakewalks in this league. But talk about how you think he may, just based on what you've seen over the years, how he may lead, because he's also, like you were, a leader on this team. The guys are looking to him to get him out of this to some extent. How do you think he responds in that deal?
I have to believe that it's. I haven't talked to him, of course, over this period of time, but knowing him, I mean, you could, if he was asked the question about, well, tell me about yourself, it might be like, I use football coach. Well, Google me. I went.
Yeah.
And Braden is the one who's usually. He did have some early years in high school where, his team. Quality-wise was not like some of the top 10 to 15 teams. So it wasn't like he didn't lose.
Okay.
But he's never faced the over a period of these 4 games. Just think about those 4 teams.
Yeah.
I mean, just think of 3 of those on the road.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that he's struggling, but I think the team is struggling. And I think that, Matt and the coaches are trying to figure some things out until we get some performance, just even a bit of performance from the 3 and 4 position to help Fletcher and Trey and Braden out. I mean, Braden was delivering set shot threes to those corners, and if they took them, we just haven't been making them. And so now Trey gets more. Trey, Fletcher, and Dustin get more focus. And I mean, I just can't imagine the energy that he is, and particularly because we're talking about Braden.
Yeah.
So he comes down, he goes over one high pick as hard and as fast as he can, and then the other center pops out. Now they do the reverse. He comes back again as hard, and those guards are physically trying to fight over those picks, and then they pop out. Many of the teams are double teaming on the other side of the pick, and it's that way almost the whole game.
Yeah, I know.
And so the energy that he is required, Mike Steele and I, one of my teammates that you know well, we're talking about this the other day. I don't think there's anybody in the country that's ever had the physical demands of energy that he has during the course of the game, given how good he is and the attention that he draws from. If it's just one player, he's going to win that every time.
Yeah.
But when it's 1.5 or sometimes 2, and then you miss a couple shots, or you get fouled and it's not called, or you make a great pass. I know I've talked to Dustin about this. Braden will pass to Fletcher, and inevitably Fletcher will pass fake and go someplace else with the ball rather than taking a really open shot. And I know I think Matt's been talking a little bit to Fletcher about that. But when I'm working so hard to get the ball to a guy to score, I want that guy to score.
Yeah.
And I don't want him pass faking to piddle around with a couple more dribbles and then take a shot that's worse than one I just gave him. Yeah. And Braden can't afford to do that. But when I was playing, and of course, I didn't have to worry about that with Garrett and Kendrick because they never passed after I gave it to them. But I would be going nuts with that pass fake after Braden gets rid of it.
All right, well said. All right, I'll just do a quick pause and we'll start up again. Okay, so back with Bruce Parkinson, of course, Purdue Hall of Fame member, good friend of the Smith family, but also father to Austin and Trent. Very proud of his boys. Austin, the women's basketball coach, I should say, at Butler, and they'll be playing in the Big East Championship. You're going to be going from Florida to New York, right? Are they in New York? Is that where they? No, are they playing Mohegan Sun?
Mohegan Sun Center.
Yeah, okay. You talk about, and Austin was certainly a cerebral basketball player, much cut out of your same cloth in terms of that. But, you look at Braden, and that we mentioned in the last segment, just that desire, that high level of expectation, not only of yourself, but of your teammates, and trying to make sure you can raise all boats. And you had the same guy. You had you had talent around you as a player, but that fine line of leading, getting on their rear ends to make sure we as at Purdue is doing the things that you need to do. I sense your personalities are a little bit different between you and Braden, but Braden maybe arguably maybe a little bit quieter. I don't know if that's fair. And I know Matt Painter's talked about that some, but just talk about that role of leadership and getting your guys in the right places, but also that mindset as Purdue turns the calendar to the rest of February, the Big Ten tournament, and then the NCAA tournament.
Well, I think from we share some of the same leadership, I guess, skills, talents, responsibilities. I don't know. And Alan, you followed this program even when you were a little kid, and I was around your mom and dad and family.
Yep.
The intensity level, I don't know of a person that is more committed and more intense than Braden.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't remember what game Dustin and I usually talk at halftime, and whatever the game was, it was a game he wasn't happy. Braden wasn't happy with. It was 3 or 4 games ago before this 4-game streak started. And he had Braden felt like he needed to have his dad come over and shoot with him, and just look at his shot and stuff. And one game after the day of the game, he was in a gym at 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
Braden was.
They can't get him out of it. That's
right. So know that better.
Yeah.
You're closer to that, and I just hear tidbits every once in a while. So his intensity level, and because of that, and his commitment level, is similar not only to developing his own game, but to Purdue and winning. And so I've got to believe that during this stretch, and when he's looking around and he's not seeing a level of commitment that he personally is used to, I suspect that's might be some tougher conversations every once in a while in the locker room, and even probably with the coaches. But whereas before, when you first come in as a freshman or sophomore, even though you're the leader on the team with the ball in your hand, starting with it, but Kendrick and Garrett, they were when I first came, and then you kind of earn your, you're the guy, as you said earlier at the very beginning, he's leading now on defense and offense. And there's no question he has 2 other great leaders with him, with Trey and Fletcher, but it's that threesome. And so it's always bouncing personalities. And like you said early on, you add these other things to the equation, social media, NIL, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then you add, I don't know how many coaches of basketball that Matt has and Izzo has, but I mean, you look over there and it's like the number of coaches that football teams have now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so and all of the data analytics that are available that would say that I don't know. Fletcher gets most of his jump shots on the right side, either next to the baseline or when he's going to drive. And so now they're all planning for that.
Yeah.
This is hard. I mean,
they're scouted.
It's hard. And now add those 4 teams and the next 3 teams that you talked about coming up, not one of those is going to be an easy one. And so I bet they've had this couldn't have come a better time to have a little bit more time. I bet there's been some heart-to-hearts with Matt and those 3, and I bet and probably with as a team, those leaders, those 3, they're probably talking in the locker room amongst themselves a lot, and so it will be very interesting because Cronin's a really good coach, and UCLA has kind of gotten used to seems like they're finding their stride, and
yes,
so thank goodness they've had a little more time, and they're having to play in Mackey. Michigan, when that Wolf kid played in Mackey for the first time, that's an intimidating place, and we're so fortunate and blessed that our crowd, the facility, and the loyalty of Boiler fans is just like none. It's incredible. And I'm telling you, you run out of that tunnel. I wish every Boiler fan had an opportunity to run out of that tunnel before the game with the fight song.
Yeah.
And then hear the crowd erupt. And I'm telling you, Alan, it's like you feel like you can jump up, even as a guard. I could jump up at the top of the square and jam one. It's incredible. And so we're going to have that in our favor, as we always do.
Yeah. All right. So, and you kind of hit it in the first segment. So win that record, and you're going to be in front of a television, and when that happens, what will go? And you've mentioned that nobody more perfect, especially with the close relationship you've had for all these years. But what will go through your head? I mean, in terms of that,
I'm going to be so proud of him.
Yeah.
He's family. I wanted someone. I knew it was going to happen, and probably a good time to talk about it, because I suspect Rick and Billy and some of the ones that played in the past. So I played in 112 games.
Yeah,
and Braden has played in 103 already. He's probably going to play in 140. After next year. The one thing I'm really happy about, and it was interesting watching Izzo and them talking about him taking over Knight's record.
Yeah.
When you think of like Billy and Rick and others in the past, Big Dog, and gosh, there's so many others. One thing you do really have to look at is the number of games. And the one thing that I am so happy about, that's not a discussion with Braden, because he's averaging more assists in more games than I did. And then to have our personal relationship, I could not be happier. And to be included, and I said this to somebody the other day, I didn't even know of the record that it was on the TV that had that shot of Braden and I side by side.
Yeah.
And it was over 1,000 points, over 500 assists, and 400 rebounds. I didn't even know that was a record, and that was mine, that I had that. And think of what that picture is going to look like when Braden gets done.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and then him thinking back like me, 48 years after the record, and thinking, well, they have to play a lot of minutes. They have to start every game, and they better be really, really good, because he's going to put that context out there for a point guard that I can't imagine it's ever going to be broken.
Yeah, it's funny. They can sort, as I said, with all the numbers now in these quote unquote records, and I'm not making fun of them at all, but they can sort anything now, because the databases have got stuff, and you can. And Braden Smith, what was he the first to do? The assist, points, and rebounds. There's only two guys since all the data has been there. And of course, he's, like you said, 75 is kind of where it started, because your steals aren't recorded. Even before your time, not all that long before you, they weren't keeping assists, or weren't putting assists in the box score. So it is a remarkable thing. And I think when you put him in the context of Magic Johnson and others in the Big Ten,
Jason
and he
Kidd.
belongs, Jason Kidd, that makes it all the more unique. All right, we could talk about Braden all day long, and I appreciate your willingness to do so. I do think our viewers and readers, et cetera, need to know a little more about Bruce Parkinson and the time you played. An interesting time. Obviously, Coach Fred Schaus, you were recruited to Purdue by George King, and of course, our mutual friend Bob King, the late Bob King, that meant so much to Purdue basketball for so long. But talk about, you were the first year that freshmen were eligible. I mean, you come in from Yorktown, and I think it was Tennessee, Purdue. I know your dad played at Kentucky, right?
All-American.
and was a great player there in 1947. I want to say, if my memory is right.
Close, 46.
46. And my point is, you had a lot on your shoulders in a time where Mackey Arena and Purdue had expectations. It was just after the Mount era. And this is a program that had already developed at a very, very high level. And you get in there and you start as a freshman. What was that like, trying to convince some of your, John Garrett, Frank Kendrick were all older than you. You had other guys that you had to beat out to take that position. But what was that experience like for you?
Frankly, Alan, thinking of coming to Purdue, my dad had gone to Kentucky, and like he was an All-American his junior year. Then he had to go to the service. And so me deciding between, coming to Purdue as Purdue versus Tennessee, but it was never with one thought that I would ever start as a freshman, even though that was the first year they were eligible. I had two people, one, my high school coach, which I was absolutely Don Rogers, I was blessed with. And he always told me, Bruce, if you can pass and play defense, you could play anywhere at any level. And so that was always my mindset as a player. And then a guy that played at Purdue was the high school coach for Don Rogers, a guy named Dan Thornburg, played at Muncie Central, won a state tournament. He was my high school history teacher as well as the coach before I got into high school. And he told me before, in the summer before my freshman year in high school, in the summer before my going to Purdue, that he says, Parkinson, what are your goals for next year? And this was the discussion before my freshman year in high school. And I said, well, I'd like to start on the JV team and then be a starter in sophomore and junior year in high school. And he looked at me like I was as dumb as a box of rocks. And he said, you can start as a freshman, Bruce. And I never had, I had so much respect for Mr. Thornburg that whatever he said, I would have believed. And as it turned out, I ended up starting. And so flash forward 4 years later, it's in August, right before I'm getting ready to head to Purdue. Mr. Thornburg used to run then, and I'd be down like I was many times at the park shooting by myself. He'd come over and talk. I wasn't scared of him then as I was before my freshman year in high school. He said, all right, Parkinson, what are your goals for? What are your goals for Purdue? And, he had played there. And I said, well, knowing who was ahead of me, I said, obviously I was thinking I was going to play on the freshman team, that I'd like to be third guard as a sophomore and start my junior and senior year. Because I had Gamoff, Rick Reisinger, Luke, Tom Gilbert. And he looked at me again like I was dumb as a box of rocks. And he said, didn't you learn anything from our last discussion? And he said, all the time that you put in, you can start there as a freshman. Now, both times I discounted that, but Thornburg said it twice. And so when we get to Purdue, it's not like now where everybody's in the locker room. You probably remember that
you were probably in that side locker room.
We're in that side locker room with the track and swimming guys. And it was, we were put in some corner, Mike Steele, Brad McNulty, Robbie McCarter, and I. And it's the week before the season started. And I think I may have told you this story before, but week before and my practice gear is not my locker. And Mike and I and Robbie and Brad are there dressing. And I said, guys, my gear is not in here. And I said, Frank, who was the equipment manager then.
Frank and I,
Yeah, you remember him.
Oh, yeah.
I said, he is going to think that I stole my practice gear. And I said, so I'm going to go down and get it. I went down and with my head between my legs. And I said, Frank, I do not have any practice gear in my locker room. And he looked at me. Well, of course you don't. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, your practice gear is in the varsity locker room. And I said, well, why is it there? He said, well, didn't they tell you? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I learned that I was going to move down to the varsity, to the main locker room from an equipment manager 1 week before. Coaches hadn't said anything. And so even at that point, I wasn't thinking that I would be able to start. But Frank and John they needed somebody to pass the ball. They didn't need somebody to come in and score. And so, and I could defend. I mean, I always guard the best offensive player. And so it just, it just worked, Alan. But it was never with one thought. Whereas Braden, he comes in, looks around, and he is so confident in his abilities and skills. He clearly would have been thinking, I'm fighting for, I just expected I was probably going to be, they still had a freshman team.
Yeah.
And then, over the course of the fall, it felt like I might be able to play some, but it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, they spent all that time trying to find another point guard when Braden was coming in, because Braden came in with that injury and all that, and the rest is history. Yes, you did have some good guys, and you're always first to credit. It was a go-go basketball team, great team to watch during your tenure. John Garrett, of course, from Peru, Indiana, another small town guy, but a big time recruit. And of course, Frank Kendrick, who just passed away. Talk about those guys as players. And you can start with John, but then we talk about Frank as players, because John was a great scorer, but did a lot of things for this basketball program at Purdue that people forget how good he really was.
There's a video clip of some of the highlights of the NIT, and I hadn't seen that, and one showed John running the break, and I had forgot John could score. He could score on
at 6'11",
6'11", and he could run the floor, and he was a really good shooter. Not, we weren't talking 3-point shooters then, but he could catch and shoot, and he was really smart. If he would have been a little bit more dedicated in terms of conditioning, he enjoyed himself. He was really, really good. But I'm not sure how committed he was. He could have had a 10 to 12 year NBA career. He was so you start with him, and then you move to Frank, and I'm telling you, people had no idea. And of course, people now, you would have, but Frank was the real deal. I mean, he could score on anyone. And so we had two guys that were pro-like, and then you throw in Jerry Nichols and Bruce Rose, who were outstanding forwards, and they complemented each other really well. And then from Denny Gamoff to Dave Luke, it was that sophomore year team was a really, really strong team. And now as we look back this season where we are right now, that Ohio State game and that Penn State game, oh my gosh, it's just at the time you think that's a fluke, but you don't think about like these last seven games who we're going to have to play. And we had one or two of those. I think Iowa was a game we shouldn't have lost.
112 to 111 over there, right?
Yeah, you always have those games. But I was blessed that and that's kind of, we're a portal missing somewhere in that 3-4 position. And you said earlier, Alan, that this team's built probably for maybe even to be better next year. We had one or two pieces, and young kids. The kid from is it Brownsburg or Brownstown that's redshirting?
Yeah, Jack Benner.
Yeah. He's a nice player. I saw him play a little bit in high school, and of course the big kid that's redshirting,
Daniel Jacobson. Yeah.
But we need a junior or senior probably help at the 4 position, but from my playing days, we had a blend that George King, ultimately Coach Schaus, took over of some real nice compliments to each other.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, then you go out. Then you get, after Frank and John graduated, and you guys go to the NIT. You ended up that season ranked number 11. You were really, and no disrespect to this team, certainly higher ranked than that team, this current team is. Now you may and would have been probably a 3 seed at the most in the NCAA tournament in today's world, and would have been darn dangerous. I mean, you think about your 74 team, you had North Carolina State on the ropes at home. Long story on that game, but they win the national championship that year. Indiana, Michigan tie for the Big Ten championship. And, of course, only one team went to the NCAA. Michigan goes instead of Indiana. But I have to ask you, because you had some unbelievable battles with Quinn Buckner in Indiana and some great games that are in the history of Mackey Arena. Those games, the 73 game, your freshman year when you beat Indiana, your games after John and Frank were gone in 75 and in 77. They were just unreal battles with Indiana. But talk about that rivalry and also facing Quinn Buckner, obviously another great point guard in the history of the league.
Yeah, he and Bobby Wilkerson probably to this day are the two best defensive guards that have ever played together. Yeah. I mean, you start with that.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anybody that would have knowledge of players back at that time to have watched today, but to have those two together and to play that IU team, most people say that's that undefeated last team for them. The year I broke my wrist was the best team in history,
Yeah.
And it was an honor then. I've remained friends with several of them. Kent Benson, John Laskowski, Abernathy, Tom Abernathy, and Quinn. Every once in a while I get to see him. Bobby Wilkerson every once in a while. But sometimes the definition of your legacy happens to be how do you play against these best teams. And fortunately, I'm done. I can look back now and think I had a really good game freshman year that we won. We got screwed at IU. Laz still knows we got screwed at IU the
74
year.
Yeah,
that might have been my best game. That particular year, I stole the ball to put us up 1, and then
a phantom call, right?
Phantom call that Coach Schaus chased. I can't remember, was Art White or one of them, the IU referees back then, and toward his locker room. And then, of course, I had the broken wrist that senior year when they won the national championship and were undefeated. The next year, we won by 18 in Assembly Hall, Kent Benson senior year, and then we won on national TV. It's one of those few national TV games.
Right. First time the NBC did, John Wooden did the game, right?
And Dick Enberg. It's my favorite picture of all of my sports pictures of being between Mr. Enberg and Mr. Wooden out on Mackey Arena floor and a whole bunch of people behind us. And I'd set the arena steals record that day with 7. And we won again. So I have some really good memories. Sometimes I wasn't worth a nickel against Wisconsin or Northwestern, which back then was the teams that were kind of toward the bottom of the conference. But I think that that group IU guys, they just brought the best out of us, and we had some great games.
Live, joined by Bruce Parkinson, Purdue Hall of Famer. That little record of his, that assist record, by the time some of you watch or listen to this, it may be broken. But tonight, Purdue plays UCLA. Historic in its own way, because UCLA, the first team to come into Mackey Arena when Bruce was in about 7th grade, I think, maybe. But the Boilermakers and Rick Mount, Billy Keller, Herman Gilliam came within 2 points of beating one of the great dynasty teams of all time. Of course, that game tonight, Purdue-UCLA, a huge game for Purdue, and then some. All right, Bruce, getting back to, your days at Purdue, and really a historic time, because also, this is no understatement at all. The best group of 4-point guards, I should say, at one time was when in that 75-76 year, were Kyle Macy, Jerry Seasting, a guy named Eugene Parker, one of the all-time greats, and sadly we lost him too early. And of course, Bruce Parkinson. But talk about when that happened and those guys all came in. And of course, that was before you had a wrist injury in Madison Square Garden against Rutgers, I believe it was, and broke your bone and was out for the season. But talk about just that competitive of having those four guys in the same place at the same time, and trying to find time for all of them was going to be an interesting deal for Coach Fred Schaus.
Well, you mentioned Eugene.
Yeah.
Let's start with him, who became a multimillionaire agent for football and some basketball players. But you're right. He was really good. He was a great,
and he was the least regarded of the four of you by a long shot.
Yeah, exactly. And then you bring Cease in and Macy. That would have been my first senior year.
Yeah.
And so we didn't practice like during the summer. It was when you got there in the fall, or maybe we would have been there by that time. But they were heralded. Kyle, Mr. Basketball, Jerry right behind him. Jerry was tough as nails. Kyle could shoot the eyes out of it. But like you said, my second game of my senior year. Second game my senior year, I break my wrist, and so that allows Kyle to move in to the starting lineup. And, I mean, he has a tremendous freshman year. And he, I think, got 38 maybe one game.
First Big Ten game.
Yeah, I mean, I
think he hit like 19 free throws, and it was a triple overtime game up at the barn, and Purdue won that one. Unbelievable, but yeah.
So, and then you have Cease, who's tough as nails, who played, I don't know, 10 or 12 years in the NBA. And so they got a lot of playing time. And so that year was the year I broke my wrist, was also the Olympic tryout camp.
Yeah.
And both Eugene and Kyle, I'm not sure, I think Jerry went back home, but Eugene and Kyle agreed to stay a week or a few days after our finals, and before because I played in the Pan Am team.
You were a gold medalist on the Pan Am team, which is a big deal. Go ahead.
I was invited to the Olympic tryout camp, and of course I hadn't cast on 5 months. I had just gotten it off a month before, and so I knew I wouldn't make the team, but it was an honor to be invited. And so I remember the last day, Kyle and I were going to work at Baltimore shop. Mr. Stevens at the men's clothing store. We had already planned the summer. I was coming back. He was going to come back. And Eugene was going to be there in the summer. And so for 2 or 3 days, we played one-on-one together to help me try and get into some shape. And I remember the last day, never forget that. And I know if Eugene were living, he wouldn't forget it either. We played, and it just happened that Eugene and I were playing really well, like we had done before I was healthy. And Kyle was one that was maybe a half a step slower than either one of us. So, usually when I played one-on-one with Kyle, I'd win the first couple games, and we played more than that because I could block his shot some. Because he was not quite as quick as I was. And so we did a round robin, and I bet we probably played 3 games against each other. And Eugene and I, it was that day for us, and we just pounded Kyle.
Yeah.
And some people said that he may have gone in and asked Coach Schaus for some promise or something about, was he going to be, with me coming back? And I've heard the story. I never heard it directly from Coach Schaus that he said, no, Park's my guy. And but anyhow, when I last see them that day, I told Kyle I'd see him in a week. And I don't know how long when this discussion with Kentucky, because that usually doesn't just start up. But and I'm thinking, and while I'm at the Olympic tryout camp, it's announced that he's transferring to Kentucky. And so then it's Eugene, Cease, and I, and it was, and we're Cease and I play golf usually every summer, and we still talk and on group texts and stuff. But those 4 that was a pretty pretty good group of four
it's
guys.
It's not been matched here. I'm telling you right now. I mean, there have been some great ones. There have been some great combinations, but there've never been four. Kyle Macy transfers to Kentucky, wins the national championship.
Great decision for him.
Yeah, and played in the NBA. Didn't play, I don't think, longer, coincidentally, than Jerry Seasteen did, but he did play. And of course, I don't know if Kyle's coaching now and is doing broadcasting, but has been in
great guy.
It was funny. A funny story that he came into Mackey Arena to do a game, I think, maybe for a radio, or maybe it was TV, and he looks a little different than he did, and he goes, I'm sneaking in here, and people do remember Kyle Macy, but in that story being what it was. All right, that 77 team was a really good team. Of course, Walter Jordan and Wayne Walls, two bookend forwards. Walter was another version of Frank in some ways, different in others, but that was a team that you had North Carolina on the ropes. That was back when you became the second Purdue team to make the NCAA tournament, and you're playing them down in Raleigh, and you have them on the ropes. Of course, Carolina goes on to the national championship game there and loses, I believe, to Marquette. But talk about just getting to that level and the way that your career ended. It was disappointing that last game, but you guys were very, very competitive. And in a Big Ten that was, again, with Michigan and Purdue and Minnesota, it was an all-star lineup of great college basketball teams throughout the 70s.
Yeah, that was the first, I think, around the first change where they added somebody other than the conference champion. And North Carolina, Phil Ford and that crew, and Dean Smith. And you probably remember, many wouldn't, that the Monday of that week, I sprained my ankle really, really bad. And I was in a cast, not a walking boot. I was in a cast. And so I didn't practice that week. When I think they took the cast off the day before the game, we played at NC State. And I got off the plane in a walking boot, and that was kind of what had been reported. And there was no comment. People just assumed I wasn't going to play. And, like a lot of times when this could be the last go around, you'll do anything. And Doc Combs, you remember?
Good old Doc Combs, yeah.
So I didn't practice, and Doc Combs, I think it was, I don't know if that painkiller is xylocaine, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I got a shot before the game, and people tell me that Dean Smith looked and was pointing at me when he came out as if he's not supposed to be playing, and they were all talking, and I had to get another shot at halftime, and we were so close. They called, and it was me. I think they used to do a run and jump, and they threw the ball inbounds, and I can't remember whether I turned, but I traveled. They called it travel. I didn't think I traveled, but they called it. And that was toward the very end of the game. It was a pivotal kind of play. And so, but again, like you said, national champion, they went to the finals, I think that year, right?
Lost Al McGuire, won it.
And
right.
I'll never forget, Jane was around for that game. We weren't married yet. And I was screaming because the pain, and Doc Combs, I think he was out eating or something afterwards, not to be able to be found. I couldn't.
Yeah.
And that pain, I shouldn't have been playing, but that pain wore off. And it was the most intense pain that I'd ever experienced at that time. And Jane basically just held my hand in our motel room. And then Doc came in, I think, midnight, that maybe gave me another lighter shot. And but it was obviously a big time experience, and we were so close there. But great team, another great team.
Yeah, no doubt. And then fun guys to watch. That was a fun, Walter was fun to watch, could score like anybody. Wayne Walls could block and play and could score too. I mean, I can remember their freshman game, their first Big Ten freshman game, they put up 28 and 24. They could score as well. You that helped. You had good guys and fast, and Fred Schaus too. I want to ask you about just Coach Fred Schaus as a coach, because he and George King were out of the same, cut out of the same mold, like the fast break, like to get up and down the court. But talk about playing for him and his philosophy, and really how that played to your skill set a great deal.
Well, it was, Coach Schaus comes from having coached Jerry West in college. Then he's the general manager, right? Coach and general manager for the Lakers when he came. And, back at that time, it was either the Knicks or the Lakers that you follow if you were a basketball. You were a basketball fan. Philadelphia as well, with Wilt and Dr. J there at that time. So he's the finest gentleman that you could ever be around.
Yeah.
And with the history and knowledge of the game. And we just happened to come in together. And when I was playing, as you know, you don't commit until after your senior year of high school and you take the official visits. Yeah. And so he did they had a small Purdue plane that took him to Mike Steele's home, Robbie's home, and Brad McNally's home. Yeah. And because of, we just connected, just like Matt and Braden connected. When you have a player that the only thing they're interested in is winning, and you've got needy guys that need the ball, and I filled that role for Coach Schaus and of running the team. And of course, you do have to demonstrate some basketball, skill and intelligence.
You got to be able to play, Bruce.
You got to be able to play. Yeah, but so he had my back, Alan. Like there were some games that, like all of us. I mean, all of us. Braden would love to have that second half back at IU, like several of them would.
Yeah.
And I had my share of those, and I never did that. There was never a game as bad as I might have played, and I had a few of those that were not so great. I always started the second half.
Yeah.
And I never walked into a game on a trip not knowing that Coach Schaus always had the full belief, and he said it publicly many times, that he wouldn't trade me for any point guard in the country. And Matt has been great about that reinforcement with Braden. And you talked early. I mean, you've been around basketball for so long, and you've seen so many cultures over the years. Yeah. Two of the key guys during that period of time, one played a little bit more than the other, but from a culture standpoint, they were absolutely critical to our success. And that's our good buddies, Dick Satterfield and Mike Steele.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they were culture people. They're still culture people to the Purdue program. And and there's and just like Matt's so good about getting people to understand their roles and to play those roles the best that people can play. He's done that for years and years. We were lucky to have that with Coach Schaus and his family, Barbara and Jimmy, and I can't remember the older.
John was the oldest.
Yeah.
John was John played at Oregon, and then I don't know. I never met John, but certainly knew Jim.
Class act. I mean, that family.
Jim went on to a great career as an athletic director at Wichita, Ohio University, and of course, then ended up being the commissioner of the Southern Conference. A great career that would have made his dad very proud. All right, one guy we haven't really talked about. We're going to end it with this because we both feel the same way about him, and that is Bob King. And again, part of my role in my old age is to make sure people around Purdue basketball, they know who Bruce Parkinson is now, and they should, but they always need to know that. But they also need to know what Bob King meant. Not only your days as a player, but all the relationships through your son, Austin. I'm sure he had some relationship with Trent too, who wasn't, in terms of that, the role of a mentor, the role of a steady hand, the role of one of the great basketball guys that there ever was in Bob King. But it's hard to put that into words, probably without getting emotional, but also just what he's meant to you and the Purdue, the story, the tradition, which is now being celebrated in Mackey Arena, and guys like Bob King have made it the way it is now.
two things, people. I don't know. I didn't see the podcast that you had with Rick here recently.
Yeah.
Did you talk about Coach Bob with
Oh,
Rick?
yeah.
I'm sure because
Yeah.
Rick.
And he had a role like bringing Rick back from Lebanon a few times, but that's another story. But go ahead.
Absolutely. But Coach Bob, so flat top cardigan sweater, came to see me my sophomore year. And that was the beginning of, I can't imagine how many from, when he started and became that role of, he became a confidant, a second father. I know Frank felt like that. I mean, virtually every player, there was something special. In fact, when I talked at one of Coach Bob's celebrations, I looked at the kids and I said, thank you for sharing your dad with us. That had to be hard for them. And because he spent so much time with the basketball team and family but beginning with his handwritten notes all through the years.
I still have mine, even as a manager. I still have it
notes
with the little Bob King encircled. Yeah,
and I know Frank has talked a lot about Coach Bob, and we've all said that Coach Bob should have had his name on Frank's diploma. and for getting him out of trouble with getting so many parking tickets. We all had some parking tickets that he had to work on for us, but he would chew your ass if if it was need be, and he would love on you and hug you, and he was one that I don't think there was anybody in sports that ever made me feel better than him. And the other, I think, tribute, the respect that he had with high school and other college coaches, the only coach that Bob Knight would talk to at Purdue would be, and you probably knew this, when they would meet, when IU was practicing, Coach Bob would either be able to watch, or before or after, Knight would find him, or I don't know how they had their signals together. But they talked, and they were long talks. And I know Coach Knight appreciated him and respected him. And he was never a head coach. But, you talk about glue guys and glue for programs. That was Bob King.
Yeah, well said. And nobody quite like him. He's had such an impact from actually still wanting. I like to write handwritten notes because of him, and how the impact of that on our families was hard. It's hard to quantify because it was very, very important. Bruce, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed this. I always enjoy talking to you, and I even enjoy the time we can go to basketball practice and Matt Painter comes over and talks to us. And he doesn't talk to me, but he talks to you, and I learn all this basketball, which is one of my favorite things that we get to do. So safe travels to you. Best of luck to Austin. I know Austin and Trent, your boys, and Jane, what a lovely family. And Austin, hopefully big things for him at Butler, as I know you're proud of his coaching acumen and that world that he's in as well. So, and we'll hope for a turnaround for Purdue. I think the way you talk here, I feel confident that things will turn for the Boilermakers, and maybe by the time you've watched or listened to this, it already has. So with a win over UCLA, we'll see. But we'll look forward to you being back in Mackey Arena before long. I always enjoy times we have a chance to bump into each other. So safe travels to you again, and thanks again.
Thank you, Alan, for including me in this. And also, I suspect at some point this is going to play. I'm hoping Braden's going to break the record tonight at Mackey, and I wish I could be there. And buddy, congratulations in advance. I'm really proud of you as a friend and a Boiler. So I couldn't be happier about you breaking my records.
All right, awesome. Well said. Yeah, hey Bruce, thanks so much. Thanks to Bruce Parkinson for an excellent interview. We appreciate his time and expertise, and of course the story of him and Braden Smith that won for the Boilermaker Annals. Thanks also to the Union Club Hotel. Remember, this spring the Boiler House Prime opens in West Lafayette, nestled in the Burke Boilermaker complex. Experience the dining rooms, refined club-inspired ambiance with a 2-story wine wall and grand 30-seat bar. Then savor an exclusive raw bar and signature cuts of beef. Visit BoilerhousePrime.com today. We'll be back next week, probably talking some Purdue basketball, maybe a little spring football, also with Tom Dienhart as that opens up this week. And we appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen. And thanks again to the Union Club Hotel for sponsoring Saturday Simulcast on GoldandBlack.com. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.